Hello, and thank you for asking me along to speak to you about law and information security, and in particular, why law firms are prime targets to cyber attack and data breaches, and how ISO 27001 can stop the bleed. Now, before we get into this proper, obviously, usually I would give an introduction. That was kind of done earlier, but just as a reminder, my name is Gary Hibbard, and I'm a consultant who is the co-founder of Consultants Like Us, and we're Yorkshire based. So you are going to have some honest opinions and straight talk in relation to information security, cybersecurity, data protection. This presentation comes with a healthy dose of reality and opinions and maybe some cyber horror stories as well if we get into that. But you're definitely going to have some plain talking. So I hope you're comfortable with that. I hope that's okay with you. We do have time for questions at the end, so please do leave your questions until then. Put them into the chat. More than happy to answer them at the end. But let's start at the beginning. Why is security important? Well, there's a number of reasons. First of all, let's look at it from a legal perspective, because we're talking to you yourselves who are in the legal sector. So let's address that. First and foremost, the Solicitor's Regulatory Authority mandates that appropriate measures to protect client information and promptly report breaches is in place. This is actually Rule 2.1, and it talks about maintaining systems and controls to protect data. You also need to conduct regular risk assessments on IT, your staff, making sure that you've implemented these appropriate security controls. And that's a key word I want to just ask you to pause for a second to think about. Appropriate. What's appropriate to you? If you're a small law firm operating out of one office, then clearly what's appropriate to you is going to be completely different to a different law firm that operates with hundreds of people operating in different offices, maybe even operating across the globe. So what is appropriate to you? And I want you to keep that word in mind as we go through this presentation. Now, in terms of the security and legal imperatives, of course, we have the good old GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, or as I prefer to call it, giving data proper respect. And it states within the Article 5.1 that you need to process personal data in a way that is processed in a manner that ensures appropriate security of the personal data. That key word again, appropriate. Now, some organizations will tell me that they have insurance in place, so they don't have to worry about security too often. Well, even if you have insurance in place, more often than not, as we all know, insurers will be coming and asking you questions if you have a breach, if you have an incident, and they'll ask that you have put in place those appropriate security measures. And how do you evidence that? And that's really key. So security, or being able to evidence security is in place, is really important. But why law firms? Why is this a problem for you? Well, as I said, we've got some honest conversations to have here, some plain talking. And let's be honest, there are some unique issues and risks that are very relevant to law firms. First and foremost, expanded attack surface. Attack surface meaning basically anything that cyber criminals can attack to try and draw data out or to be able to gain access into your networks and your systems. We know that law firms and the people who operate in the legal sector often travel around and travel up and down the country on trains and in planes and automobiles. And therefore, they are more likely to lose a device. Maybe they are, of course, using those devices out of office hours because we know how busy you are. And therefore, all of these devices, the laptops, the mobile phones, the tablets that we give to our teams, and the places that they work, client sites, work from home, coffee shops, on trains, on planes, we know that all of this leads to them to be vulnerable. We also know, of course, that we are using technology which isn't maintained. In some law firms that we have worked with, they have used or are using aging infrastructure. The technology hasn't been updated, and therefore, if there is a vulnerability identified within that system or within that technology, then these are windows of opportunity for cyber criminals to crawl through. And of course, the final key vulnerability here for you good selves, to name but a few, is the human factor. And we'll talk about this again a little bit later, but we're all fallible. We're not saying here that people are the weakest link, because they're not. They're actually the strongest link, but they are also always the target. When we talk about and hear about cyber crime and breaches and such, we just need to recognize and remember that these breaches are occurring because cyber criminals are trying to gain access to people in order to extort money out of them, be that through scams or exploitation of some description. And law firms, of course, I said it already, you're busy people. Therefore, you're distracted. Therefore, you are prone to error. And that therefore leaves you vulnerable. We also know, of course, that lawyers and the legal sector, I'm going to be ageist a little bit here, but we know that many people operating in this sector are of a certain age. And as we have an aging population and managing partners, and partners are of a certain age, they have less time, less patience, shall we say, to engage with security training and incident response processes and such, all of which we will talk about later. And unfortunately, none of this is standing still. This is evolving. This is the first point in this presentation that I'm going to use the term artificial intelligence. It may come up a little bit later, but AI, of course, is everywhere. And whilst you're using AI to make you more effective and more efficient, so are cyber criminals. They're using it to create deep fake voice and video. They're using it to create self-mutating malware, malicious software that will infiltrate your practice and will bring out and exfiltrate the data that you are trying to protect. And of course, now that we are in this world of AI that we're using to perfect our writing capabilities and our presentation skills, perhaps, we know that cyber criminals are doing exactly the same, creating the perfect phishing messages. So gone are the days where you can say to someone, just be on the lookout for an email that has grammatical errors and spelling errors, because, well, it no longer applies. Cyber criminals have caught up. They're utilizing AI to make themselves more efficient. So why are you the perfect target? I mean, I said this earlier, that you, of course, are vulnerable to attack. Well, there's a number of reasons why you are the perfect target. Why, as a cyber criminal, would I want to steal from you? And I want you to pause just for a second and ask yourself that question. Look around your office. Think about the people you interact with. Why would you be a good target? Why would someone want to steal from you? More often than not, it's for these very simple reasons. You deal with highly sensitive client information. If I wanted to steal some information from you, I may be able to steal some information about a merger and an acquisition of local companies. I might be able to steal information about intellectual property. Someone's created the cure for cancer, or they've created the new form of electricity and power that the world it's going to save the world and the environment. Maybe you deal with that kind of information. Maybe you deal with some of the darker aspects of life, um, murders, attacks, GBH, the physical aspects of law enforcement. Maybe those are the kinds of things that you deal with. If you, at the very least, are just a corporate lawyer, then just a corporate lawyer has access to highly sensitive information. So you also have information that deals with large financial transactions. So you'll know about the movement of money. You'll be involved in the movement of large quantities of money. And another reason why you are the perfect target is, again, plain speaking here, many people fear an email or a letter coming from a lawyer. You use quite complex language, you have a complex structure, so people are easy to be duped into believing that they're speaking to a lawyer, or that it's an official letter if it looks as if it's come from you. And therefore, people are more likely, general public are more likely to respond to an email if it looks as if it's come from you. And that's the reason why you are the perfect targets. If I want to try and trick someone into transferring money, for instance, during conveyancing, then I'm going to try and masquerade as a law firm. And in particular, I'm going to try and masquerade as you. It's called man in the middle attacks, where a criminal will get between you and the buying public or the paying public, and they will inject themselves into that conversation where they redirect funds that should have come to you into the cybercriminals' bank accounts. You are the perfect targets because of who you are, because of the sector that you operate in, and the sensitivities around the data that you are involved in. Now, why are you also potentially a victim or likely to be a victim of a cyber attack? Well, in all honesty, there's a number of key reasons. First and foremost, you don't know what you don't know. You assume your IT provider has everything covered when it comes to cybersecurity. You haven't really thought about the division between cybersecurity and information security, which is the realm in which we operate. Consultants like us, we typically talk about information security and cybersecurity and data protection and privacy. These are four distinct things. When you talk about security, you may only think about, well, our IT team, our IT person, our outsourced IT provider, they look after cybersecurity. That's a little bit like saying that your mechanic who fixes your car and gives you your MOT, maybe checks over your oil for you on a weekly, monthly basis, perhaps, thinking that the mechanic is responsible for road safety. The mechanic is only there to make sure that the mechanism works. Your IT provider is there to make sure that your vehicle is roadworthy. It's down to you to decide how you use it. And that's why it's important for you to reframe this from just pure cybersecurity to information security. And of course, you don't know what you don't know. No one's expecting you to be an expert in information security. There are many different aspects to it: people, process, technology, policies, procedures. There's many different aspects to this. You're a lawyer, you're in the legal sector, you operate in a whole different world. I'm not a legal expert, and I go to experts to ask for their advice about legal matters. You need to go to experts to understand where you are most vulnerable. And quite often, you don't know what you don't know because nothing has happened, or nothing that you've observed has happened. But that's what leaves you vulnerable. It's that uncertainty, which leads us on to another reason why this is a problem for you, because many organizations don't invest in information security because you can't connect the cost with the value. It's this investment in uncertainty. Many law firms simply sit back and say, well, we'll wait until something bad happens, or we'll have insurance in place, because we don't want to overspend or go to, the gold plated version of security. Well, no one's asking you to do that. There's a key word, mentioned it earlier: appropriate. What is appropriate to you? Invest in what's appropriate. But the problem is that you don't know what is appropriate because you're uncertain about it, because you don't know what you don't know. Does that make sense? The other reason why organizations like your good selves are vulnerable is, again, this thing that I mentioned earlier, the human factor. And I'm going to say it again. Fee earners are fee earners. And whilst they're not earning fees, they're thinking, well, whatever else I'm doing is a waste of time. It's a waste of investment. But unfortunately, that mentality is the thing that leaves you vulnerable. Partners don't believe in the rules that apply to everyone else in the organization. And I say this not because I think it's theoretical. I've heard partners say those words. I've heard partners say to me, well, these rules apply to the front office, the back office, but not to me. I've got this caseload, and this is my workload, and I'm a fee earner. And I've heard them say things such as, do you know how much I earn an hour? Do you think that I'm going to spend half my time putting documents away just purely to get them out again? And all I was asking them to do was have a clear desk policy, or to at least think about how they protect the information that's on their desk. Humans are fallible. We're not saying that the humans are the weakest link. We're just simply saying that humans are fallible. But what are law firms actually looking for when it comes to security? Well, there's a number of things I believe that you're looking for. First and foremost, you're looking for control. You want to be on top of your game. You want to be in control. You also want respect. You don't want to look foolish or to be out of your depth. Of course, most law firms and people operating in the legal sector are looking to build a legacy. They're looking to build something that will outlast them. Maybe they're looking to exit the firm at some point or pass it on. And finally, there's a deep sense of pride working in the legal sector, and understandably so. You are dealing with some highly important, critical aspects of people's lives, monumental moments in people's lives, whether that be defending them in a court of law against some crime, maybe defending them, maybe prosecuting them. Maybe it's as simple as a merger and an acquisition that's going to help them retire to a life with their family. Maybe it's just helping someone to buy their first home. All of these life events, the legal sector is heavily involved in. Why wouldn't you be a target? You are the perfect target when it comes to cybercrime. So what can we do? How can we help protect you? Well, there's a number of things. I've mentioned ISO 27001 earlier, and we're going to talk about that in depth shortly. But fundamentally, there's these things that you need to think about. Again, it's the human factor. Think about people. People are your strongest link. Think about policies and procedures that you have in place. Policies tell people what's important. They are statements of fact, and procedures tell people how to comply with them. And then think about your technical controls. And we'll talk about some of these in a little detail now about how you can put these in place and then how it all fits within the ISO 27001 framework. Now, I've got about 10 minutes left on this, so it's going to be quite quick. But there is a QR code that you may have noticed that's been popping up on the screen. If you connect to that QR code, if you scan that QR code, I am running a deeper discovery day to help people understand ISO 27001 in more detail. But if nothing else, if you do the following few things, you are going to be far more secure than you were before you did them. So what I want you to do is this. First and foremost, I want you to develop policies and processes. Now, you may say, well, we've got policies and processes, Gary. They're in place. Okay, stop. Where are they? Have you read them? When was the last time you read them? And how readable are they? Be honest. Are they good policies? Are they easy to understand? Do they consider neurodiversity within your organization? If you're a large organization, that's something you really need to think about. You see, your policies need to be clear, easy to follow, easy to read, and easy to adhere to. How radical is that? These policies cannot be impenetrable swathes of text. At least they shouldn't be. Now, I recognize that we're dealing with very intelligent people. Everyone within the law firms that you work in, and yourselves included, are highly intelligent. I get that. But humor me. Don't think that everyone's at your level. Are your policies easy to read and understand? You need to do things such as creating an acceptable use policy for software, hardware, and locations. Is it acceptable to use laptops on a train? Is it acceptable to leave laptops on a train in full view of everyone who's on that train whilst you go to the buffet car and go and get yourself a latte? Is that acceptable? Is it okay for someone to leave their laptop on the back seat of their car when they go and fill up the car, or worse still, when they go into their hotel, or they go into a client meeting? Is that okay? Well, if it isn't, then have a clear policy that explains that. About the use of software. Is it okay for people to use AI to create contracts? Is it fine for them to copy and paste personal confidential data into ChatGPT just in order to spell check or to make sure that it's legally accurate? Perhaps not. Probably not. But unless you define it in a policy, well, you haven't set the rules. And you need to develop processes with those who use them. And I would say processes and policies. So sit down with your teams and say, look, if we're going to write a process here for the way that we recover from an incident, who do we need to involve in this conversation? How do we write this process? Don't create these documents in a vacuum. Work with your teams in order to create policies and procedures that work. Again, we're going to talk about the human factor here because humans are everywhere, just like data is. And if you are going to engage with humans and real people like my good self, well, use real world legal scenarios, aka stories, when you train people. If you're going to train people, talk about what it means to them. And with the greatest of respect, whilst you may believe that the first thing that they think about when they wake in the morning is your legal practice, it's probably not. So you need to think about, how do you engage them in the conversations around security? You need to think about what it means to them, their personal lives, their family lives, and such. And certainly, yes, you can talk about this in context of other law firms and the legal sector, but make it engaging. And when you are writing these policies and procedures and you're thinking about incident response, you need to think about creating a no blame culture when you're reporting incidents. You want people to put their hands up and say, I'm really sorry, I clicked a link. I think I may have done something wrong there. Because if you create a no blame culture, then people can come forward and you can respond to it much, much sooner. And make your training educational, entertaining, and inspiring. Just be human about security. Put people at the center of this. When I talk about GDPR, I often say to people, look, you may think that GDPR is complex and complicated and a bit of a yawn fest. It's a bit boring. Well, it's not meant to be a movie script, but put yourself in the center of it. Imagine it's talking about you. And that's what I'm asking you to think about when it comes to security. Now, of course, we can't talk about information security without talking about the technical controls. And there are many technical controls that you need to think about. But first and foremost, you can't protect what you don't understand. So what you need to do is conduct an assessment, identify your critical assets. How many laptops do you have? How many mobile phones do you have? How many PCs in the office? Identify your physical assets first, and then identify what sits on them. What kind of software do you use? Do you use a CRM, like HubSpot, for instance? What about your case management system? What flavor of case management system are you using? And then think about what information and data sits within that system. And once you've understood those three aspects, well, now you can start asking yourself some intelligent questions like, well, who has access to this software? Should everyone in the organization have access to our case management system? Should everyone in our operation have access to our social media account? Maybe that should be locked down to one or two key individuals. Goes all the way back to the beginning where we talked about you don't know what you don't know. You can't protect what you don't understand. So understand your information and your informational assets, and you can start to build from there. From there, you can establish easy to adopt technologies. You can speak to your IT provider, your IT team, your IT guy, girl, whatever it might be, whoever's looking after your technologies. Ask them, how can we make our implementation of technology smoother and easier? When someone comes into the business, when someone comes into the law firm and they start on day one, do we hand them a laptop that is fully configured, ready for them to use? Or do we just leave it to them? Well, perhaps we should give them a fully configured, protected device so that when they log on, it asks for their password. When they are given their default password, it automatically asks them to change it so it becomes theirs. These are all very simple steps that can be easily implemented. So let's make technology easier. And the one other piece of advice I would always say is make sure that you've got offline backups. Now, if you follow just these three things, you will be far more secure than you are right now. Hopefully, you are already doing those things. But I'll go back to this point about your policies and procedures. Where are they? How easy are they to read and understand? So, briefly, we're going to talk about what you can do. And this is very simple. You need to implement a structured approach to security, because what you cannot do is simply put your head in the sand and say, well, this does not affect me. This is not my responsibility. Because of some of the questions that I'm seeing coming through here right now, I can see some of you are taking this extremely seriously, so which is brilliant to see. But all too often, when I speak to people in various different sectors, the legal sector included, all too often I hear this, well, it's not really me, it's our IT person who looks after this. This is not my responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility. Just in the same way that we are all in part responsible for road safety. We all have a part to play. We all have to be responsible drivers on the highway, the super highway, as it was used to be called. So what can you do? What's the structure? Well, you can think about ISO 27001 as just one particular aspect to it, to a structured approach. ISO 27001 is a certification. When you are speaking to other organizations that you're looking to work with, you should ask them, are you ISO 27001 certified? Maybe you're being asked it yourself. Because what it does is, ISO 27001, it provides a structured approach to several things. First and foremost, it's about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This is known as the CIA triad within information security circles. So when people say to me, I have good information security in place, I have achieved ISO 27001, I know that they've considered confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. I also know that they've taken a risk-based management approach to information security, which, if it's risk-based, it means you've applied confidentiality, integrity, and availability controls appropriate to your organization, appropriate to the size and complexity of your organization. And now, before anyone again says or even ask the question, I haven't seen it come up yet, but before anyone asks the question, am I too small for 27001? I will tell you now, our smallest client currently is one person. Our largest client is 2,000. We have implemented 27001 for both ends of the extreme, and anything and everything in between we've also worked with. So don't say to me that you are too small a law firm to worry about 27001. You may not want the badge on the wall, you may not want the certificate, but you can certainly align to 27001, which will give you the same kind of approach, because the approach is all about people, premises, processes, PCs, and providers. Those 5 P's that you can think about, keep that in mind. People, premises, processes, PCs, and providers. If you've thought about security in relation to all of those aspects, you're never going to go far wrong. What does 27001 ultimately cover? Well, it's all about the protection of people. It's all about your right to privacy, which, as we know, is a human right. The benefits of having 27001 are multiple, especially for a law firm. It helps build trust and win business. It demonstrates to clients, especially corporate and high-end, high net worth individuals, that their sensitive data is going to be protected. It can be a competitive advantage if other law firms are also vying for the same clients and in the same market. How do you differentiate yourself? Well, having 27001 or not having 27001 could be the difference. It also helps you meet your regulation expectations or requirements, the SRA, as I've already mentioned. So it provides that structured approach, and very much the key word here for this is appropriate and evidence. It allows you to evidence that you put these the appropriate controls in place. And ultimately, it helps you protect your reputation and reduce liabilities as well. Now, before anyone starts asking me how difficult it is, again, I'm trying to preempt some of the questions I've had previously, and just looking at the chat, no one has asked that yet. I am going to say to you simply this, that yes, ISO 27001 can be complex, but it's not complicated. A lot of this is common sense. But if you approach it in an appropriate way, it becomes a lot easier. Now, just very quickly, I'm just going to talk you through our approach of implementing 27001. And it's very simple, 4-step process. We discover, we look at what's important to you, we identify the informational assets that I mentioned earlier. What do you need to protect? because you can't protect what you don't understand. I may have said that already. We then design the policies and procedures around you. We then develop them and make them your own. And finally, we deploy them into your organization and we make sure that they work for you. Now, there's a lot in here. There's a lot beneath each one of these, as you can probably appreciate. But it's all about compliance without complexity for us. It's all about making this pragmatic and practical. That's how it has to be, because we recognize you didn't get into law. You didn't start your own legal practice to start doing information security. I got into information security because I wanted to help people like you implement security and make it real. Now, before you finish this and go away, I've got a few questions that have been asked, which I'm going to answer shortly, as quickly as I possibly can, because again, I'm very conscious of time. But I am going to say this to you: if you are going to dive away, if there's nothing else you take away from this presentation, it is this, and that you need to put security on the agenda before it becomes the agenda. Because I guarantee when you have a breach, you may think right now you don't have time for anything else because you're too busy, you've got too much of a heavy caseload. Well, I promise you, the minute you have a breach, all of that will disappear, because the only thing that you will be discussing is security and what can you do now to prevent this from getting any worse than it currently is. So thank you very much for your time. If you don't want to learn more, as I said, this QR code I've been putting up on screen several times, so you can have a look at that. And we're going to run a discovery day if we get people onto the waiting list. Once we get that waiting list full, we are going to close it, and then we'll run the discovery day. We're only having 10 people on that discovery day. And I know that places are already coming as a result of this. So you may be already signing up. I don't know. But hopefully we will fill that up fairly quickly. So here's the questions that I've got. So thank you anyway, before I answer these questions, for everyone and your attention. In this last few minutes, I'm just going to answer these questions as quickly as I can. Question. Okay. How can we demonstrate compliance with the SRA's cybersecurity expectations and still maintain a practical workflow for our lawyers? Great question. The key things there is, how do we do one thing and basically slow our business down? Okay, I get it. Well, my advice is, as I've already said, use a structured approach. ISO 27001, think of it as like a recipe. If I wanted to bake a cake, I could go into the kitchen and go and start rummaging around and going, oh, I might make this. And, I wonder if maybe I should throw a bit of this in, maybe throw a bit of that in. Is that good? I don't know. Is that good or not good? If you follow something like ISO 27001, it is a structured management system. The key word, information security management system. How you manage security using ISO 27001. But I'm going to say, obviously, use experts like our good selves. The way we do it is we can help you do it yourself. We can do it with you, or we can do it for you. There's your three options. But keep it simple. So yeah, don't overcomplicate it. Think about what's appropriate. That way, if it's appropriate to you as your organization, your firm, then it's going to be practical. But yeah, I think that hopefully answers the question. What are the most common vulnerabilities you see in law firms, and how can we proactively address them? Well, from a technical point of view, it is that thing like insecure email systems, the use of legacy systems, open access, so no real access controls in place. Everyone has access to everything. And people not thinking about people, processes, PCs, and providers and premises and providers. So, if you don't think about those aspects, your risks are that you're going to miss something. Okay, next question. So so we just got two more questions. So how do we protect client confidentiality and sensitive case data when working remotely or across multiple offices? Okay, you need to think about when and where you're accessing data, and then consider those controls that I mentioned earlier. How do you train your people? What about the policies and processes that you need? What about the PCs? Premises, where are you actually accessing that information, and who you're sharing it with, the providers? So think about each of those aspects in its own right, and identify the risks associated to those areas. So are you training your people? Do you have the adequate technical controls around your IT systems and such? But that training of staff includes things like not having conversations on trains, confidential conversations on trains about clients. Maybe having privacy screens on your laptop, so that when people are working remotely or between offices, that again, information isn't being leaked. So hopefully that answers the question. And finally, the final question, just run over ever so slightly. If we were hit by a data breach or ransomware attack tomorrow, how would we respond? Okay. Wow. Okay. So in brief, step one, don't panic. Many a crisis has been made worse by just simply diving in and trying to and reacting. There is space between reaction and reaction and response. You need to make sure that you don't react negatively. If it's a cyber attack, you may trip the wire and it may inform the cyber criminals that you now know that they're in your systems. So you need to, first and foremost, if you've got an incident response plan, is to dig that out. Hopefully you look at it more regularly than just when an incident occurs. Look at who is your incident response team, get them together and talk about what has happened, not how it's happened or why it's happened. That's all for later. It might be relevant, but what you're not trying to do is apportion blame. You're not trying to point fingers at, well, you clicked on a link, or you didn't do this, or you did that. It's right. What has happened? We've been hit with ransomware. How bad is this? What is the impact? And you're trying to observe what's actually happened right now. And there's actually a term that I would ask you to go and Google, because that'll be the quickest way to do this. And it's called OODA. That's OODA. And that stands for observation, orientation, decision, act. So, or decide and act. So it's essentially a way to manage major incidents. And I think it actually originated from the military. And it's just the way that you can, so observe what's happened, how has it happened, or how is it manifesting itself? What do we need right now? So orientation, who do we need right now? What resources do we need right now? What do we need to do right now? Then decide, make a decisive action, and then act on it, or a decision, and then act on it, and then go back to the beginning. And if you cycle through that process 3 or 4 times, that'll take you through the first 2 or 3 hours. Of course, you really do need to, this is a big question, obviously, and it's a big topic. But you need to get you through that golden hour, that first 1 or 2 hours, whilst heart rates are high, whilst the likelihood is that you're going to make it worse by making a decision through emotion, through fear, through anger, perhaps. You could make it worse. So slow down, breathe, don't panic, get your team together, assess the impact, and then take action. And there you are. Thank you ever so much for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at your event. It's been I hope it's been useful. I will continue the conversation after this, but I think we're going to stop recording now. But yeah, thank you ever so much. And hope to see you on the Discovery Day. Scan the QR code. I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.